What's up, gang? Let's go back real quick. If you go back and look, you'll see we've been in Ephesians 5, seeing what all the Lord has done, and then taking the advice so we can implement it that He gives us. We discussed in Ephesians 5 where Paul says, therefore, and if you just read a little bit, you'll find that when Paul says therefore, a lot of times you need to go back and read everything that he said before he says therefore. It's very important because he's laying a foundation of truth, and then he goes into what's to do next. So in Ephesians 5 it says, therefore be imitators of God. We discussed imitators. That's the word mimetis in Greek yesterday. You can look it up, and that's basically to be a follower. And we went in depth about that. But what I want to go forward to is a little bit more, is where Paul says, therefore, two more times in Ephesians 5. Therefore, he says, verse 14, this is from the word of the Lord, awake you who sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. Number one. Number two, check this one out. See then that you walk circumspectly. That's the English word as best they could get it. But if we go to Greek, I got my notes here again as usual. You've got two things. You got the noun, which is ak, A-K-R-I-B-O-S. Carefully, exactly, distinctly, and he's setting this up for what verse 17 is going to say. But watch this. Then you got the verb in ak, A-K-R-I-B-O-S, denoting the exactness of the information rather than the diligence of the search for it. We talk about here that being clothed in humility, we move on what? Freely given information. Like Paul kind of started off his journey in his relationship with the Lord after he had his experience on the road to Damascus, he clarified who was speaking to him. If you go in there and read it, you'll see. And then at the end of the conversation, he says to the Lord, after he finds out who's talking to him, he says, what do you want me to do? He gathered information, he heard, he listened, and then he's in a position now. What do I do now? That pretty much explains that. Learning to move on the next best, doing just simply the next best right thing, not based on feelings and emotions and operating out of fear or doubt, is not part of the Lord's will. Let's get there. Anything according to that flesh, the flesh profits nothing. Not it. We're getting to the will. Here at His Will, Not My Ministry, that's what we're after. We want to know what the will of the Lord is within every given moment. And that's what we're after. The Bible tells us that our Father has equipped us, or He's got in His mind for us to be conformed to the likeness of Jesus. And to be conformed to the likeness of Jesus, if you look at Jesus, He only did what His Father told Him to do. He only said what His Father told Him to say. And He did the will of Him who sent Him within every given moment. So telling our flesh to shut up and our carnal thoughts that can be hostile to Him, giving no thought for our lives, because today's enough trouble of its own. That's what we're after. So if we go to the verb, you got the word naypho, N-A-Y-F-O. To be sober, not drunk, free from illusion, free from the intoxicating influences of going astray. There's the will. In other words, sin. If you look up sin and dig deep, you'll find it's self-empowered living. Jesus did not live a self-empowered life. Period. And it says, with the influence of going astray, like the impact of selfish passion or greed. It's from the flesh. Even with good intentions, self-reliant living is the most subtle form of pride there is. Jesus said point blank, if any man follow me, he must deny himself. Okay, let's simplify this. A 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid that has loving parents, if they are to follow the parent, they will be in a position of denying themselves. As they grow older, like 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, they really got some thoughts about what they want to do for the day. But the parent comes in with their thoughts about what to do for the day. Yeah, and overrides that will with their will. So if you slide it on back just to that 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old little kid, you can kind of grasp what Jesus was saying when he looked at grown adults and told them, unless you become as these little children, you cannot enter the kingdom. It's simple. This world and the people around us, well, the people around us and our own thinking is according to the sinful nature of Adam, which leads to self-reliant living. I see many believers that are Christian that hit the freaking doors every Wednesday and Sunday, but they got a lot of thoughts in their mind about Monday when they're in there on Sunday. Or they got a lot of thoughts about Thursday, Friday, and Saturday while they're in on Wednesday. They're still going about their daily lives, carrying the burdens thereof, and that is not what our Father intended. That is not what our Father has prescribed within His Word that lets us see self-reliant living for what it is. Period. If you're carrying the weight in any form of fashion of the life that you think is yours, to carry that weight thereof, you have been or are still deceived. Period. There's no argument there. It's in the book. I've read it. And I've implemented it. I read it. I looked at it myself years ago and went, wow. Really, Lord? I believe you existed, Lord. I believe that you came, you died, you rose. I believe that you got a place prepared for me and a million gazillion others when I take my last breath. He said, I know. But nobody taught you what I'm fixing to teach you. And that was to unlearn self-willed living. Peter unlearned it. Matthew unlearned it. Luke unlearned it. Abraham unlearned it. Moses unlearned it. Many of our figures of people in the Bible, we see them unlearning it. Denying its right to have any dominion over them. Flipping their trust switch from themselves and all of their beliefs to someone greater.